For 17 years, I've had the privilege of working with a great team on a big education idea. Now, recently, I've been having this dream where someone 100 years in the future calls me up and says, keep up the work. It's making a difference. What you're onto is one of the top 10 ed reform ideas of the next 100 years. So I grew up in New York City. That's my dad, my younger brother, and me. When I would go to play dates or birthday parties, I noticed my friends would get picked up and they'd take the subway or the bus. There's one who always took a limo home, and we'd go home another way. My dad would ring the bell, the door would swing open, he'd be wearing shorts or sweats, and we'd run home. We'd run across Central Park, we'd run through different neighborhoods, no matter what the weather, rain, sleet, hail. And my dad made it fun. Before eBay in the 70s and 80s, people threw out incredible stuff in New York. And we'd weave through the streets of New York, checking out the goods. My dad also gave me access. One day he said, we're gonna go to Fort William Henry. And we got on a line. And he picked up a number, a race number, because he was gonna run a 10-mile race the next day. And as a 6-year-old, I saw him do this and I was enthralled. 12 months later, I'm on that same line and I say, hey, Dad, can I try the race? So he gets his number and he says to the lady, we have a late entry. And thus began my racing career. So that's me wearing a bathing suit because that's how I thought athletes raced. And I ran for what seemed like 2 days. It was an out and back race. I didn't even realize it till my dad had run out and he was on his way back. He said, go, son. So that day I came in third. I came in third for my age group, which was 18 and under, of which there were only 3 of us. I technically may have come in last. There was a grandma and I, we were duking it out. It was like one of those last scenes in Rocky. I don't know what really happened. But I do know, from that point on, I think I changed the way I looked at taking on big tasks. Now, this last summer, my son Javier, at the age of 7, same age that I did that 10-mile race, said, Dad, you're nuts for doing all these races. Can I try one? I said, sure. So my 4-year-old daughter, Lucia, heard this conversation. At an age where she doesn't even tie her sneakers, she said, Dad, I want to try a race. I said, go for it. So I see how my dad has inculcated a passion for running in me, and now it's going generational. Well, this big idea that we've been working on for 17 years, it has to do with middle schoolers. It has to do with passion. We've had the privilege of working with 30,000 low-income inner-city middle schoolers in all time zones of the U.S. Let me introduce you to 2 of them. That's Sean on the left. I once asked Sean, I said, Sean, and if you're kind of blocking out when middle school is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, 9 to 14 hormones, remember those? So Sean on the left, I said, did your mom talk much about your dad? And he said, unicorn. He said unicorn because unicorns don't exist. Why should my mom talk about something that doesn't exist? Now, many of us have been stopped at a red light. At this age, Sean, a block from his house, was at a red light in the passenger seat of a car, and there was a taxi right in front, and he witnessed that taxi get jumped, and 2 guys pulled someone out and shot him dead right in front. And the victim's child was watching this as it went on. Now, Sean at this age was an incredible arguer, and often when he argued, I thought I was watching a prodigy at their best. But more often than not, when he was arguing, I thought this isn't going to end well for Sean. I once introduced Sean to a journalist who just wanted to offer him an internship on the sports page of her paper. Sean argued so much that he never got that offer. Let me introduce you to Sharnique. Sharnique's 2 older brothers dropped out of school, community college and high school. Sharnique, at this age, was incredibly shy. She said to me, I would try to go a whole week without talking to anyone, as if it was her own personal video game. I remember asking Sharnique, I said, Sharnique, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, I want to be a nurse. I want to be a pediatric nurse. I don't know any. So before I fully reveal our big idea, let me put something into context. Say that bus is the United States. Right now, we have the largest economy in the world. China did just pass Japan, but we still have the largest economy. And when my parents were born, 25% of Americans had high school or the equivalent degrees. Today, it's 3 times that percent. And since 70, we have doubled the amount of spending on education if you control for inflation. But a lot of people are wondering, are we going in the right direction? Do we have a flat tire? Are we stuck somewhere as other nations are passing us by? So I was in this classroom in Shanghai recently, and the intense focus on academics was incredible. Now, when I was born, the United States had twice as many college graduates per capita to our closest competitor. Today, we're 9th in the world and dropping. Now, there's a lot of smart people reading about education and watching movies about education, but the debate isn't always coherent. It's not clear where we're going. I was in Palm Springs when all these birds suddenly appeared, and they were squawking and making noise, and it wasn't clear which way they were going. This reminds me of the education debate today. It's incremental. They're not these big paradigms that can help ensure we're going in the right direction. So as I watched those birds, a group kind of pulled off and made this powerful V and started going somewhere. Well, at Citizen Schools, we're calling all you to be part of that powerful V. So this is our logo, and you see it's made up of blocks. At Citizen Schools, we work with middle schoolers, and we tap talented adults to teach 10-week apprenticeships, to teach from the textbooks of their lives, use the city as a classroom. And we have middle schoolers build things and create things that add value to the community, hence the logo with the blocks. We're building a better community, better society. And the trillions of dollars that have been spent on education, not a lot of it's empowering kids like Eugenia and her mom. So this is a word cloud. I was in front of 50 Googlers a month ago, and I asked them to take out their iPhones. None of them had any. I said, take out your Android smartphones and text me your passions. And this is what I got. Engineering, hiking, lockpicking, yacht racing, reading. And we spent that afternoon brainstorming the 10-week apprenticeships they could teach, who they'd bring in as a guest speaker, what field trips they'd go on, what the wow at the end of the semester would be, where adults would say, wow, I can't believe middle schoolers did this. So how does this work? We work with middle schoolers that go to school for about 6 hours in a traditional school day. And then we add another 3 hours on top of that. We help with homework, we do a number of things. And then once a week, we call for citizens to teach 90-minute, 10-week apprenticeships. We're expanding the learning day by 30, 40%. We're adding 400 hours on top of about 1,000 hours middle schoolers are going to school. Now, a lot of schools today are expanding the learning day. It's called many different things, and charter schools are doing it. A third of them are incredibly high performing. But district schools, stretching their teachers to teach more into the afternoon, that's not a recipe for success. Harnessing the talented pools of folks like you is. So we started 17 years ago. We incorporated on Martin Luther King's birthday in 1995. Eric Schwartz, with his arms held up high, is our CEO. He's been leading us incredibly brilliantly. These were the first 60 kids that we worked with. So who are some of these citizen teachers? Meet Mitchell. This is Mitchell Resnick, the beard, the glasses, blue shirt, the one up above. He is at MIT Media Lab, one of the 22 labs there. He runs Lifelong Kindergarten Lab. And he invented the Lego brick, which allows you to program Legos into robots and so on. And he lamented how expensive that software was. He said, I'm going to come up with a language called Scratch. And Antonio's wearing the shirt for the logo, where kids can animate. And today, millions of kids are programming in Scratch. But when he first launched it, his team of postdocs taught at Citizen Schools. And he's subtly spelling out the word wow. I don't know if you see that. Sergeant Fonseca taught Cape Verdean drumming. Here are some students that made a campaign in their neighborhood raising awareness on the environment. And it was taught by a graffiti artist. They first started designing their sneakers. And here's Mayor Menino. He makes his big decisions in the Eagle Room, the longest serving mayor in Boston. And here are our apprentices. That's what we call our middle schoolers. Give me advice on urban planning and transportation. So we're impacting families. Here's a grandpa who's a custodian of this floor at the State House. He didn't come to work this particular day because his grandson was presenting to the governor, someone he had never made eye contact with. He wore a jacket and he told me it was the proudest day of his life. Here's Jacques. You may know Jacques. He's at the ticket counter at Delta. And he said his two twins, when they come home, that the conversation's been elevated because of the apprenticeships they're taking. And he says, thank you, thank you. So 4 years ago, we made the strategic decision that we wanted close to half of our apprenticeships to be STEM related. And I was talking to Doug Melton, who probably on the whole planet has the best odds of curing diabetes. And I said, we want more STEM folks. And he said, what is this STEM? Is it stem of a leaf? Is it stem cells? And I'm thinking, here's a guy that is right in the target of my STEM recruiting, and he doesn't know what I'm talking about. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math, of which there are 10 million Americans in that field. And if we can help facilitate 1% to 10 million, 100,000 passionate folks to share STEM careers, we could more than double the K-12 science teachers in America. And many of you are some of those folks. And STEM lends itself to hands-on learning. Like Priscilla and Debbie holding the alligator and holding the mallet. If any of you want to sign up for the bed of nails, I'm taking names. So to date, we're at 1,000 apprenticeships in 20 cities. And we have aspirations in the next 18 months to get to 2,000. And how have we gotten to this big number? A lot of it is our corporate partners. They've been great. 60% of our apprenticeships are from corporations. And they also are helping on boards and helping to sustain what we're doing. Bank of America recently taught 25 apprenticeships. Fidelity recently taught 75. And Sean, in this picture, he was in charge of the online strategy for Fidelity, and he brought his A game teaching kids web design. And I mentioned the Googlers. We've had 250 Googlers in 4 different states teach engineers and ads folks. And we're calling all citizens to get involved. In January of this year, 12,000 cabs, thanks to AOL, played a call to action to get involved as you got in your cab. At the same time, on the Jumbotron in Times Square, on the hour, every hour of December, there was a call to action for this. So the good news is we're in 7 states. These are our executive directors. North Carolina, California, Texas, Massachusetts, New Mexico. We're on an Apache reservation, New Mexico, New York, and New Jersey. So here's my dad. He shared passion. He gave me access. He made learning fun. We are doing this with thousands and thousands of citizens. And often when people sign up, they say they want to make a difference, but they often say, I think the transformation was equally for me as it was for the middle schooler. So here are my 2 kids. They dream a lot, and I know a lot of their dreams are because of the passionate adults they have in their lives. Well, we want that for more kids. And 6 years ago, we partnered with the Edwards, which was about 30 seconds away from being closed. It was the lowest performing middle school in Boston. And in just 3 years, it's now one of the highest performing schools in the state, in a state that's one of the highest performing states in the country. And we're doing this with 19 schools right now, this moment. So back to Sean and Sharnique. So this building's not so far from here. There are 10,000 windows, 10,000 light bulbs in the 100 windows on this side of the building. So there's a tradition of sneaky brown students programming the game Tetris on that side of the building every year. And one of those brown students was Emily. And Emily moved to Boston. She said, I want to teach Tetris at citizen schools. And Shy Girl signed up for that class. And she called me from the Women of Society Engineers Conference. Sharnique called me. And she said 3 things. She said, John, 1, I didn't know women could be engineers. 2, today's changed my life. I want to be an engineer. And 3, we just nailed the Tetris presentation. She went on, round of applause for Sharnique. She went on to be the salutatorian at Tech Boston Academy, graduated from Smith College, and she's now halfway begun a master's program to be a math teacher and teach at the school she went to in Dorchester, 02124 zip code. So what happened to the kid who argued? Often his arguments, they didn't end well. Well, at citizen schools, he had the opportunity to argue before 2 federal judges. One case he won, one case he lost. He still argues with me about the case he lost. So here is Sean as a 6th grader. And here he is as a high schooler wearing the same shirt. As a 6th grader, Sean took on all authority. As a high schooler, he began to figure out how to work with authority. Well, at citizen schools, by connecting adults with kids like Sean, we're democratizing teaching. We're expanding the denominator of who teaches, when they teach, and what they teach. We're helping to erase the achievement gap, the access gap and the opportunity gap. And that call I get from the future, it's also calling you, because you all can be the heroes of this story. What if you rallied your folks like the Googlers and your networks? And this wasn't just for 30,000 kids that we've had the opportunity to work with, but 1 million kids. So don't take my word for it. Meet Sean today, 10 years later. Sean Robinson works for the Department of Labor in Massachusetts. He's a 2L at Northeastern Law School, and he has something he wants to share.
James Baldwin once stated that the decision to remain silent in the face of injustice is not a neutral action. It's a conscious decision to align oneself on the side of the oppressor. And I think this is a very true statement. In our everyday lives, we see things that we know are not right, we know that are unfair, and we decide not to take an action, but just to continue moving. I was a high school student. It was the summertime, and I remember just getting off work, going back home to play basketball with a series of friends and neighbors. When we were done playing, we retreated to the porch to recap the highlights of our athletic endeavors. Just then, our conversation was interrupted by a horrific scene across the street. A neighbor of ours ran out of her house, being pursued by her boyfriend at the time. As she ran out of the house shouting, he took his foot and sent it into her backside, kicking her off the porch, and she fell down onto the cement beneath. From there, he ran down off the porch and raised his construction boot and just stomped down on this woman. Just then, 2 children came out of the house behind them, and I remember them pleading with their father to stop. Despite the screams of his son and daughter, this father would not relent and just continue to kick away at this woman in her back, her chest. Just when we thought it was over, he raised up off of this young lady and took out his car keys and walked towards a town car not far from the house. Got into the car, and just as he was about to pull away, the woman stood up and reached for a cell phone. He got out of the car, ran back towards her, snatched the cell phone away from her, spiked the cell phone into the sidewalk like a football, and proceeded to beat her all over again. Conventional wisdom would inform us that the guilty party in this situation is that man who resembled an NFL player that so viciously attacked this young woman. But I would beg to differ. I believe that the guilty one was myself, the group of young men I was with, the men and women driving up and down the boulevard while this was happening who didn't stop their cars, and also the pedestrians on foot. I remember this moment quite vividly, and at 24 years of age, I can honestly say this was one of the most shameful actions or inactions I've taken in my life. And I would implore anyone watching this video, as I challenge myself, to remain vocal and vigilant and do something in the face of such inequities. And this can take place in various forms. It could be stopping in at a hospital to volunteer. It could be visiting a relative or someone you would have known from your community at the nursing home. Or it could be challenging yourself to help improve one of the most important institutions we have in this country, and that's the institution of public education.